When was there a time where you shouldn't have laughed at something, but you did? I was 18 to 20 and working at a department store. 3 men walked up to me and struck up a conversation while buying white button-up shirts. Apparently they were buying matching shirts for a wedding. They asked if there was a child's suit section. One of them added, "The best man lost so much weight." I cut off the sentence with a chuckle, and he finished that he died and looked at me like I was a monster. They all looked really sad or mad depending on who you looked at. They apparently were going to buy a suit for the son of the deceased that was stepping in for him. They asked to see my manager, and she was really disappointed in me for laughing at a story like that. I did my best to tell her that I had no idea it was something terrible like that, and I was just laughing since I thought he lost so much weight he needed a kid's suit. She didn't really buy it, and she didn't respect me after that. My dad, using 9 laughing tears images to announce that our family cat whom we love dearly had passed away. When I was a student nurse, I was asked to tell an patient that his daughter couldn't come visit him because she fell down the stairs and had broken both her arms. I could barely contain myself because the patient was there because he had broken both his arms. My friend's memorial service. He passed away at only 24. Obviously it's really somber and everyone is crying. His mom goes up to speak. One of my best friends who was one of his best friends used to joke about wanting to sleep with his mom. It was an ongoing dialect between them that was really hilarious. His mom goes up, starts talking, and he whispers, "I still really want to motorboat your mom's tits, dude." Like 4 of us just lost it. It was extremely inappropriate and everyone stopped and just looked at us. I tried to pretend I was crying to ease the tension. Rest easy, Chris. We all miss you. I laughed at my grandfather's funeral. Didn't shed a tear. It leaked a few people, neighbors, not family. Fam knows what happened, thinking I did something bad to him. My grandfather was bedridden for 16 years. His left side of the body was paralyzed. I was 17, so basically all my life I've seen him bedridden, and he was my best friend. He asked me not to cry and always think that God took him because he couldn't see him suffer anymore, and wherever he's going he'll be happy. So to distract myself from crying, I started thinking about all the good times we had and ended up laughing at one such memory. So yeah, that was pretty terrible. In high school we watched a play where a girl dies of a drug overdose. The girl playing the part was way over dramatic, really chewing up the scenery, and when she finally collapsed dead on her bed the theater was dead silent. A special needs kid in the audience yelled out, "Oh well," and the place exploded with laughter. Back when I was around 10 to 11, my family went to a funeral for an aunt that passed away due to cancer. My dad wasn't really close to like that aunt in particular, personal issues that are too boring to go into detail, but he still went to the funeral. He wasn't making a scene or talking bad about her or anything. He was just mainly keeping to himself. So, during a moment of silence, my cousin, her daughter, started singing The Avenue Mariah as an eulogy, I guess, while everyone was sitting. Quietly, Dad started mock singing in a very high-pitched tone, quiet enough not to be heard by anyone around, loud enough to be heard by me, sitting by his side. I started covering my mouth cause I wanted to laud so hard. The more I tried to contain myself, the more my dad did the high-pitched singing, up to the point that my eyes were teary. Another aunt behind me saw me, bent over, holding my stomach and my mouth, and I guess she thought I was crying. She leaned over and said, "Don't worry honey, she's in a better place." I lost my shit. I lost it so bad. It was one of those laughing fits that the more you try to contain yourself, the more you laugh. Even my cousin stopped singing and just looked at me as if I had killed her mom myself. I excused myself and got out of there fast. I waited for the rest of my family inside the car while the rest of the family just stared daggers at me. During the car ride, I had to explain to my mom and my sister that my dad was the one who made me laugh. My dad just answered, "She's lucky I didn't bring my trombone," and did a wah wah while they were putting her on the ground. It happens to me more than I care to admit, but the worst time was at my brother's memorial. An aunt we had, who was a very nice person, had got religion recently and decided to sing a gospel song. The problem was she couldn't sing at all. She got up, with no backing music, and sang a really out of tune gospel song. The worst part was she took really long pauses between some of the lyrics. So people started to clap thinking she was done with the song. She wasn't. This went on for like 5 minutes. She would pause. People would start to slow clap. Then she would start caterwauling again. I buried my face in my hands and people sitting behind me started consoling me because they thought I was overcome with emotion. As my shoulders were shaking violently, I did have tears running down my face though. I still feel very bad about this. Edit. Forgot a word. Funeral. Thinking of Highway to Hell in my head. At my Uncle Bill's funeral, my Aunt Mary claimed that she had cared for him in his darkest times. I let out a solid ha. Everyone turned towards me. I finished with an uncontrollable giggle, poorly hidden behind my hand and a wad of tissues. No regrets. R.I.P. Uncle Bill. The 17th of December 19. Edit. She, in fact, did not care for him in his darkest times. This made me laugh so much, and I don't even know why. Because we all know an Aunt Mary. My daughter's teacher's mom died, and the sub had all of the kids make cards and ask me to drop them off. As she lived near me, I was chatting with the teacher as she looked through them, and she burst out laughing and handed me one. Dear Ms. Smith, I'm sorry about your mom, but hey, we all gotta go sometime. When I was a kid I often found myself laughing at the most inappropriate reasons at things that were often not funny. Case in point, in 5th grade my class went on a field trip to see a Japanese taiko drum performance at a local theater. It was so cool. I was taken aback by how powerful the drums were. About halfway through the performance one of the younger uber-muscular Japanese American drummers came to the front of the stage and in a deep bass voice told us how he was going to sing us his song that his now dead grandfather taught him years ago. He started to tear up and rubbed away the tears. He started singing. It was in falsetto. I'm not sure what it was. The song was beautiful, but for whatever reason I felt an uncomfortable smile start forming on my lips. I panicked and internally started screaming, why now? Why we? My lips parted to show my teeth and I giggled. My teacher shot me a look and tutted under her breath and several of the girls next to me whispered that I was showing my true colors. The song was beautiful. I never felt so betrayed by my body in my young life. Years later I still think about that moment. I laughed the first time I watched Titanic, since my brother was going wee when the boat tilted and people were sliding down it. When my uncle died, his casket was being lowered into the ground, and my cousin threw a flower onto the coffin and said, "From Cornwall with love." And I started laughing because it sounded like the worst James Bond film ever. Who the duck names their kid Cornwall? I didn't laugh, but when I used to get uncomfortable my facial expression would look like I was smiling. I did it when my teacher was telling a sob story about herself. She got furious because she thought I was making fun of her and tried to get my family to send me off to a living facility for mentally challenged children. In boot camp, I laughed at another recruit who was getting yelled at because they were screaming some pretty funny shit at him. Then they turned around to me. Anything at the library. Shit didn't even have to be really funny. The fact that you needed to be quiet and is not allowed to laugh was insane. You tried to suppress it, but the more you do, the funnier it gets until you just have to run outside and burst into laughter because the last name of a book's author sounded like fart. Once, a friend of mine got ACL reconstruction surgery and nearly died. They had mixed up the anesthesia for the spinal block and instead given her an emergency coagulant. She started having really bad seizures on the operating table and the doctors quickly put her in an induced coma. This lasted for 2 weeks. Felt like a ducking eternity. During which they said they had no idea if the damage to her brain or other organs was permanent, or if she would ever wake up again. The day it happened, I ended up leaving work early because I couldn't think straight. And as a result I missed a meeting I was supposed to go to. It wasn't a big deal, but I had promised I would be there. The next day, a coworker asked me why I wasn't at the meeting, as I began to say that my friend was in a coma and we had no idea how bad it was, but she may never wake up again. I started laughing uncontrollably. I even tried to say there is nothing funny about this, but I just kept laughing, and the coworker just looked at me in shock and confusion. I was pretty confused myself. I have never had that happen to me before or since that day. To this day I have no clue if she thought I was making up a ridiculous excuse to miss an unimportant meeting, thought I was a psychopath, or both. My friend eventually made a full recovery, though she had to go back a second time to get the actual routine surgery she was meant to get in the first place. Edit. They gave her a coagulant, not an anticoagulant. If you nick a vein during a surgery and the patient starts to bleed a lot, they inject this stuff to keep them from bleeding out. This is what they accidentally put into her spine instead of anesthesia. Also corrected spinal tap to spinal block. Sorry for my English. As a kid I laughed during stressful situations, so I could barely hold it in when my parents were confronting me about almost flunking out of school. A patient violently shitting on me. Donating blood in college with a friend. We finish and go to the table for snacks, where they have people to watch you, to make sure you don't pass out. Well, my friend is 6 feet 2 or something and me too. We have a juice box and get ready to go. We both stand up and the life drains from his face and falls over like a sack of potatoes. On top of another much smaller kid. Welp, I lose it and laugh like a hyena. To be fair, I was also a bit lightheaded and out of it. A nurse, maybe E5FT 100 pounds, comes over and starts trying to roll my friend over, who is still unconscious on top of this poor kid, who only went there to give blood. He wakes up a minute later still on top of this dude, and I'm still laughing it up. The nurses then all give me the stink eye, like I was somehow at fault here. I'm not a big guy and doubt I'd have been able to help, even if I wasn't weak from donating. So I slink out of there with a smile on my face still, but trying to hide it from the entire room now watching this scene play out with concern for my friend. He's fine BTW. And I love this story. 10/10ths would laugh again. At my grandfather's funeral, my uncle named all of the grandkids by name and how they took on certain attributes of my grandfather. He named everyone but my middle brother, and when he looked at me to say WTF, I laughed. And so did my other brother. Not me, but while we were watching a documentary about the KKK in school, and a Klan member shows the camera his robes, the class weirdo said, "Hey, my dad has that same jersey in his closet." My friend lost it. I mean, he was wheezing and crying of laughter, but he tried to cover it up by pulling his shirt up. The teacher was so tired of him, she didn't even care, so she tried to ignore it. Once when I was about, say, 4, I slammed my face against my driveway, knocking out my 2 front teeth. I was laughing the entire half hour. My dad was freaking out with my bloody mouth. Still to this day I don't know how I was able to laugh when I should been crying in the scenario. Edit. Why the hell is my most upvoted thing a comment about my eating my 2 front teeth? A friend told me her grandma had terminal cancer. Just a few minutes prior something funny had happened, and it was still in my head. I started laughing about the funny thing, then realized how unbelievably inappropriate it was to be laughing at that moment, which just made me laugh harder. It was a vicious cycle that ended in a lot of apologizing. The scene in the Titanic movie where the ship leans up and they're hanging on and some people fall and hit the objects on the way down like a pinball game. I ducking laughed my ass off as a kid, but when I saw it as I got older I realized how dumb I was. Lol. I was in my low teens, maybe 13 or 14, and with my mom in the drive-thru at Taco Bell. We had just ordered and pulled away from the speaker when mom just rear ends the people in front of us. No real reason other than the fact that mom can't ducking drive worth a shit. Never has been. So there we are, clogging up the line. Mom's doing what she's supposed to, and I don't know how much was embarrassment and how much was the ridiculousness and absurdity of it. I mean, come on. Really? A day fucking snail's pace in the drive-thru. And it's not like you didn't duck and see them. And mom asks me to look in the glove box for some paper or other, which I do not find. But I do find a box of Tic Tac, which for some reason is suddenly hilarious to me, like the icing on the cake. And I cannot stop laughing. I'm certain this pisses mom off to no end. And looking back I feel terrible about it. But I just laughed and offered mom a Tic Tac. This girl in 8th grade used to pick on me like it was her job, and she got everyone on my case too. One day, she was rocking back and forth in her chair and leaned too far back. Before she fell backwards, she threw herself forward and ended up hitting herself in the mouth. She lost 3 of her top front teeth. Legit swallowed them. Blood everywhere. I cackled. During my grandmother's funeral, the preacher's going on about how we'll see her again in heaven. When my brother leaned over and whispered, "But not you." Apostrophe. I think everyone has laughed at a kid falling, even if you're not supposed to. I work in healthcare. A few years ago I was meeting with a 60-something-year-old patient and their family member, both female, who for whatever reason I assumed was her adult daughter, since they looked quite alike. We were wrapping up the appointment and were cracking a few light jokes. Addressing the patient's family member, I said something along the lines of, "You must get that from your mother," referring to the patient. The patient cocked her head to one side and firmly stated, "She isn't my daughter. She's my sister." Before I had comprehended the gravity of that statement, I reflexively let out a laugh and smile that insinuated, "That was a funny joke. You look 30 years older than her." They did not smile back. The patient proceeded to explain that the person she brought with her to this appointment was her older sister. However, since this patient did not take care of herself and appeared to be generations older than her healthy older sister, I had made the fatal mistake of assuming it was her adult daughter. Needless to say, I didn't exactly bounce back from that one and actually felt quite badly for hurting her feelings. Hey, thanks for watching, and don't forget to subscribe.